Good day. The Biden administration's decision to declassify a CIA report, or what the media calls a report, into the murder by Saudi agents of the Saudi dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi, for me, poses more questions than answers. Briefly, I'm going to say something about the document that's been released. The media calls it a CIA report. It is not actually that at all. It is an executive summary of a much larger and longer report which has not been declassified. What we have is a summary that is just 4 pages long and which has itself been redacted in places. Briefly, it says that the murder of Khashoggi was ordered by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS from now on, who is the de facto ruler of the country. But it also says that the evidence that points to MBS is essentially entirely inferential. Briefly, MBS controls the country's security and intelligence services. The people who carried out the murder are somehow are members of MBS's bodyguard, and the agency which organized the murder is already also connected to MBS. Lastly, the assassins travelled to Istanbul, where Khashoggi was murdered, in private jets which belonged to a company which had been seized by the Saudi government, in effect by MBS. Well, as I said, that's inference. None of that is actual evidence. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of the CIA possessing information of any direct order by MBS to anyone to have Khashoggi killed, and evidence by inference is not good or sufficient evidence to bring a case in any court. So, though this report or this executive summary points the finger at him, it's important to stress that the case against MBS is very incomplete. Having said that, based on my own views of MBS, I accept the claim in the report that MBS almost certainly was the person who ordered Khashoggi to be killed. Here I'm going to say a few things about MBS, at least my own opinions of him. I think he is a disastrous ruler. I think he is well over his head, and I think he has a wildly exaggerated view of his own abilities, and that he acts on impulse and recklessly and doesn't clearly think what he does through. Almost as soon as he became de facto leader of the country, when he was actually still nominally only Saudi Arabia's defense minister, he committed Saudi Arabia to a protracted and, as it turns out, disastrous war in Yemen. He's also imposed a blockade on the neighbouring Gulf state of Qatar, with which he appears to have some kind of quarrel. That blockade has now been lifted, and he's also engaged in some very bizarre ideas about Saudi Arabia's development. Briefly, he wants to drive its development forward through a huge and reckless investment program, which he has sought to finance through sales of shares in the Saudi oil company Aramco. None of that has worked very well. The Aramco flotation, which was supposed to happen earlier last year, failed to attract many overseas investors, and some of the projects that MBS has in mind for Saudi Arabia, including an extraordinary project for a kind of digital city seems to me wildly misconceived and ill thought out, and likely eventually to bankrupt the country. MBS has also taken some extraordinary, reckless steps against other Saudi princes. Shortly after he became Saudi Arabia's ruler, he rounded a whole number of them up, kept them prisoner in the Ritz, in a swanky hotel in Riyadh, and carried out what was effectively a major shakedown on them. He's also pushed aside various other more senior princes to himself, and is keeping several of them either under arrest or under house arrest. Last but not least, last year he launched an extremely ill thought out and ill conceived oil war against the US frackers and against Russia, which he eventually had to row back on and reverse. So this is not someone who inspires much confidence, and I have to say that that makes me strongly inclined to believe that the claims that he is responsible for Khashoggi's murder are true. So let's put that aside now and ask the question, why, however, has the Biden administration decided to release this report now? Well, it seems to me quite clear that the Biden administration, for reasons unknown, has decided that MBS is someone that they don't want to work with. It's notable that Joe Biden himself hasn't spoken with him. He's instead preferred to speak to MBS's father, King Salman. And one gets the sense that the United States, or at least the Biden administration, not only would not be unhappy if MBS were to leave power, but is trying in some way to make that happen. I say that because there's information that the United States is also busy, apparently, trying to get the Saudi authorities to release various Saudi princes who MBS has either jailed or placed under house arrest. The key figure is Prince Nayef, who was at one point in line to become king, but whom MBS pushed aside, and who was for many years the head of Saudi Arabia's security services, and was someone that the United States liked to work with closely. So I do get the impression that the United States seems to want, or at least the Biden administration seems to want, Prince Nayef back, and in some form back in control, either to rein in MBS or possibly to push him aside entirely. Well, as I said, I would not be sorry to see MBS go, but I do wonder whether the United States, in carrying out these various plans or schemes in Saudi Arabia, trying to re-engineer Saudi policies and Saudi domestic policies, has thought this thing through properly. And besides, what is the overall objective? Well, I suspect it may have been explained by an article that I've read in the Times of London. The article, whose title is How Joe Biden Hopes to End America's Middle East Quagmire, by Richard Spencer. You will find a link to it under this video. But as it is behind a paywall, I will briefly cite what I consider to be the relevant paragraph. Biden, like President Obama before him, wants to end the quagmire that America's immersion in Middle East politics so often seems to be. Both believe that if Saudi Arabia and Iran can balance their interests, then US presidents in future will be able to devote themselves to domestic economic policies and the rivalry with Russia and China. That means Saudi Arabia playing a constructive role within the Washington worldview. The Crown Prince's capricious behavior, for example, having his critics killed, puts that in doubt. So in other words, what the Biden administration wants and what Barack Obama also apparently wanted, and we know that Obama has great influence over the Biden administration, is a situation where the US is able to balance Iran against Saudi Arabia and restore some kind of stability on that basis to the Middle East. That means getting the Iranians presumably to rein in their ambitions, and it also means apparently getting a government in Saudi Arabia which is client to the US and which will follow orders. I have to say, I think this is completely unrealistic. In fact, I think it is frankly fantastical. First of all, there is no conceivable way that Iran will play according to this script. The Iranians, who've been in the Middle East for all of their history, which goes back thousands of years, undoubtedly see themselves as a major player in Middle East affairs and will insist on their right to follow their own policies. As for Saudi Arabia, the idea that the United States can somehow control its domestic policies so as to control its foreign policies seems to me beyond far-fetched. I don't think there is anyone in Washington who has that depth of understanding of the rivalries between the Saudi princes to be able to control Saudi Arabia in that way. And I have to also say that I think that kind of meddling by the US in Saudi internal affairs is much more likely to go badly wrong and to provoke a hostile reaction within Saudi Arabia itself. Obviously, MBS himself is vigorously opposing these ideas. He doesn't want to be ousted, and the king, his father, King Salman, who Joe Biden spoke to, continues to back him. Also, I do get the sense that despite his erratic and whimsical behavior, that MBS does indeed have some support in the country from the younger Saudi princes. And of course, as the CIA report or executive summary says, he has a tight grip on Saudi Arabia's internal security organs. So I don't think MBS is going to simply leave power because Joe Biden wants him to. And I don't think that Iran is going to play ball in the way that Joe Biden and Barack Obama wanted to. I think this is a completely misguided policy in the Middle East. What I will say is that the decision to publish this executive summary now and to treat MBS in this extraordinary fashion is guaranteed to do only one thing. That is to antagonize him and to make him deeply hostile to the Biden administration, which he will from now on see as an enemy. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I suppose depends on how long MBS stays in power. Maybe the other Saudi princes will gang up and remove him. It's happened in Saudi Arabia before. But if, on the contrary, he remains in firm control of the country as he is now, then all the Biden administration has achieved by all these moves is to make itself and the United States an enemy out of someone who might conceivably have been a partner or even possibly a friend. The reality of international politics is sometimes you have to deal with people who are difficult and whom you don't entirely like. The Russians do this very well. Vladimir Putin has recently had a telephone conversation with MBS in which they discussed all sorts of topics, including oil policy, in which obviously the Russians have a strong interest. It's known that Putin and MBS have had their differences. Apparently they had a major row over the phone last year when MBS decided to launch his oil war. But nonetheless, the Russians understand that Saudi Arabia is its own country, strange and peculiar place though it sometimes is, and that they have to work with the Saudi princes, and whichever one of those princes is in control. That means talking to MBS and working with him. The Russians have never embarrassed MBS by bringing up the topic of Khashoggi, though I am sure that they, like everyone else, assume that it was MBS who was responsible for Khashoggi's death. I suspect that the Russians would also say to themselves, well, Khashoggi is one person. In Saudi Arabia, hundreds of people get executed every year, and Saudi Arabia engages in all sorts of wars and pursues active foreign policies which result in more people still being killed, and that it is ridiculous to make the entire foreign relations of Russia with a country like Saudi Arabia hostage to what happened to one person, a rather prominent Saudi as it happens, Jamal Khashoggi. That, it seems to me, is a far more mature and sensible way of conducting relations than the one that the Biden administration and Barack Obama apparently want to follow. It eschews ideas of grand strategies, of fantastical ideas of balancing Iran and Saudi Arabia. It works with people disregarding who and what they might be, accepting that they are there and accepting that they need to sometimes be dealt with and spoken to. And it always looks for ways forward to advance the national interests of the country. In that particular case, obviously Russia, but other leaders around the world follow similar policies. Donald Trump sought to follow such similar policies. It's known that he too did not entirely get on with MBS. Nobody does. But he was very, very careful never to break with him and to make a strong play of maintaining good relations with the Saudis. I don't know what Donald Trump privately thinks of Saudi Arabia, but undoubtedly he recognized as president that whatever your feelings about Saudi Arabia, it remains a key part of the Middle East architecture and a critical ally of the United States. Certainly, he didn't have any far-fetched and fantastical ideas of creating some kind of balance between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Frankly, that idea of creating this sort of balance seems to me every bit as fantastical and as utopian as MBS's own visions of digital cities in Saudi Arabia, and I predict that it will fail just as MBS's various plans will. Thank you very much for joining me for this video, for this program. Please join me in future videos. Please also look me up on our other channels, the one I do with Alex Christoforou, our main channel, the Duran. We've also now got a new channel in which we show the interactive programs we have with viewers, in which we actually answer questions that they pose to us. And of course, also remember to look up Alex's own channel. You will find links under this video. Please also look us up on our other platforms, BitChute, Library, Odyssey, and the Rumble, and the rest. Please also support us through Patreon, Subscribestar, PayPal, and via Bitcoin. And also please check out our famous shop, where you'll find all the wonderful things that we sell there, our wonderful merchandise, our famous magic mugs, our wonderful t-shirts, long-sleeved and short-sleeved, our hats, our hoodies, and our sweatshirts. And I look forward to you joining me in my next program, and have a wonderful day.